Well, good afternoon. Welcome to our regular council meeting of May the 5th. With that, I will call our meeting to order so we can get on with the business of the day. First item on the agenda, of course, is to adopt the agenda. I have a recommendation that the agenda for May 5th, 2025 regular meeting of council be accepted and passed. Moved by Councillor Burke, seconded by Councillor McCabe. Any questions, comments? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll go through the disclosure of pecuniary interest on anything on today's agenda. I have none to declare. Councillor Burke?
Yes, I have indirect pecuniary interest with M&S Properties, Mount Forest Inc. My employer has done some work on the site.
So that's for the committee of adjustment.
Yes.
Okay. Councillor McCabe.
Excuse me, I have none.
Councillor Hearn?
No?
Councillor Rankin?
I have none.
All right, thank you. Next up, of course, is O Canada. So if we get that queued up, we'll rise for O Canada. Still getting used to the new images from that. Looks great, but then I was wondering if it was incongruous to have farewell at the beginning. Of course, we're going to recess to move into meetings under the Planning Act. So we have a recommendation that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North recess the May 5th, 2025 regular meeting of council at 2:03 p.m. for the purpose of holding meetings under the Planning Act. Moved by Councillor Hearn, seconded by Councillor Rankin. All those in favor? That's carried. So we'll switch to the Committee of Adjustment. I'll call the Committee of Adjustment meeting to order and ask if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest. Councillor Burke?
So as indicated earlier, I have an indirect pecuniary interest with application A09/25 for M&S Properties, Mount Forest Inc. It is indirect in nature as my employer has done some work on the site.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McCabe?
I have none.
I have none to declare. Councillor Hearn?
No?
Councillor Rankin?
Yes, I have a declaration. My computer's just rebooting. If you give me one more minute, please.
Certainly. Take your time.
You can share mine if you need to. No, I've got the wording I need. Okay, if I can remember. Regarding A09-25. And I have an interest, conflict, sorry. One, because I am a neighbor to it, and secondly, because before I joined council, I was one of the people that opposed the project. So
Okay, thank you.
you bet I had a good wording here.
All right, so we'll move on and deal with the minutes of the previous meeting. So I have a recommendation that the Committee of Adjustment meeting minutes of April 22nd, 2025 for applications A0/25 and A07/25, sorry, and A08/25 be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Burke. Thank you. All those in favor? That's carried. So we'll move on to the application. This is A09/25 for M&S Properties, Mount Forest, Inc. Location of the subject property is described as Wellington North Range S, Wellington North Range, South Water Street, Park Lot 9, Registered Plan 61R 7008, part of Part 1, and is municipally known as 773 Princess Street, Mount Forest. The property is approximately 0.64 hectares in size. Location of the property is shown on the map attached. Purpose and effect of the application is to provide relief from the maximum number of units permitted. The proposed variance will permit 33 units to be constructed in lieu of the maximum permitted 32 units. Other variances may be considered where deemed appropriate. How was notice given for this public meeting?
Notices were mailed to property owners within 60 meters of the property and as well sent to the applicable agencies. Signage was posted on April 17th, 2025.
Okay, Zach, are you able to give us the report on this, please?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Through the chair, the application is requesting relief from a site-specific provision, which allows 32 units on the property. Applicant is requesting 33 units. Council may recall this property went through a site-specific zoning amendment in 2021. That amendment specifically limited the total to 32 units, in part because that's what was being proposed at the time to kind of give the area certainty of what was going to be constructed. The building is now under construction. My understanding is it's new owners that have bought the property. They're requesting this variance in part to reduce the size of the party room, and they're able to add an additional unit kind of without too many changes to the building. So just changes to the inside of the building. The party room would still remain. It would just be smaller than what was originally proposed. The applicant did provide a site plan, however, didn't meet the parking requirements. The applicant has now recirculated a new parking plan showing 2 more parking spaces on the property, which can be accommodated again with just some changes to the paving and landscaped area. So we do have a condition proposed as part of the minor variance that the applicant submit a site plan after this minor variance, meeting the requirements of the zoning bylaw. So as part of the reduction in the party space inside the building, now the amenity space is being provided outside of the building to meet the zoning bylaw provisions. That's everything for me.
We have correspondence in our package from Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority. Has any further correspondence been received in respect to this application?
Yes, we received an email on April 30th from Chris McGongie. McGackie, in opposition. I've circulated to everyone. He feels it undermines the zoning integrity. There's parking lot concerns, impacts neighborhood character, fairness and precedent. And those are his comments under the Planning Act. He has other concerns that are just more general. Most new apartments are not affordable. Rents continue to rise, and public and non-profit housing is lacking.
Okay, thank you. Any persons wishing to be notified of the decision must submit a written request to the Secretary Treasurer. With that, I would open the floor for questions or comments. Do we have the applicant or anybody applying to registered to speak to this?
Other than the applicant's planner, and she is here in the meeting. Where do I see her? Mm-hmm. Yep.
Jillian?
Jillian, sorry.
are you on behalf of the client here,
I am,
the applicant?
yes.
Do you wish to speak to this application?
Yep, briefly.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks. Quick intro. My name is Jillian Smith, and I'm a senior planner at MHBC, and I'm here today representing the owner. I just want to make a few points. So Zach quickly mentioned the history of the project, and I'll just recap that. So back in 2021, we received approval from previous council for a zoning amendment. And the purpose of that amendment was to permit this building and to ensure height and density were compatible with the area. We included regulations to restrict the height of the building to 2 stories. And that was below the permitted height, which was actually 3 stories at the time. And we also put a restriction on the number of units, being 32 units. So the owner is now proposing to convert a portion of the interior party room to an additional unit, bringing the total number of units to 33. And so that is a variance before you today, is adding 33 units from 32. And just really quickly, the official plan permits a maximum density of 75 units per hectare on the lands. And the proposal would see a density of around 51 units per hectare. So this is well below the maximum density permitted on the site. And it's really just a better use of the interior space. There's no physical change to the building. It's only one addition for a unit inside. However, as Zach mentioned, this will increase parking requirements. And at the time of our submission, we did not include an updated site plan, but we have since circulated that. And that shows that the 2 additional parking spaces can be accommodated on the site. And we can definitely resubmit that to staff after this meeting. And I just also want to note that we have been able to maintain some interior amenity space. So we're not removing the entire interior amenity space, just a portion of it. And we're also maintaining the private balconies and providing ample outside amenity area. So overall, we're in support and in agreement with the conclusions of the staff report and look forward to any questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to this application?
There was no one else registered.
Okay. We'll switch over to committee members then. Any questions or comments from committee members? Councillor Hearn?
Yes, I could not find in the report, like it said that, the report says that you would convert the proposed party room to a residential dwelling. But now I'm hearing that the party room is going to remain and it's smaller. So what was the size of the party room and what will it be now?
Maybe Jillian could.
Celine, are you able to address that question?
Yes, I can try. So I don't have the exact measurements of what the original party room was, but it will be, just looking at the site plan, if it says, unfortunately, I can't seem to find it on here. So the current will be 35 meters squared, and I believe that's down from doesn't quite say on here, but the proposed interior party room would be 35 meters squared.
Okay. And you don't know what the original size was?
I'm going to pull that up so I can confirm it, if you just bear with me. So the original party room was 840 square feet, and I would have to convert that into meters.
Approximately 84 square meters.
Right, so if it's approximately 84, then we're going down to 35.
Okay. Anything further, Councillor Hearn? Councillor McCabe?
Thank you. Excuse me, and through you, I guess my question is kind of similar to Councillor Hearn's. What size is the unit that's going to be added? What is it going to be kind of similar to the sizes that are already being built? just out of curiosity?
Yeah, so the current the current size of the units ranges from around 580 square feet to just under 1,000. So it would be in line with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can I
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor McGee.
Thank you. And through you, just excuse me, going through Chris McGacky's email here. So the space, the outside square footage is not changing, so there's no change to the height or footage. I think you alluded to that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. And then parking has been addressed as well.
Or will be addressed. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Hearn?
Within the report, it says, given the removal of the indoor space, the applicant should consider improving the outdoor space. Like, is there a requirement for that, Zach?
Through the chair, not necessarily. The zoning bylaw has some examples of what an amenity space would be. So the applicant's shown a patio that meets the requirements of the zoning bylaw, but there's also play structures, gazebos, pergolas, that sort of thing. So that was a comment as much for the applicant as it was for council. So.
Thank you. Because with the decrease in the space of the interior party room, I think that would be really valuable. Like, this is a really good thing for families to have a place to utilize and congregate. So that would be something I would be in support of, should this go forward as something a little more elaborate outside for families and retirees.
A couple questions myself. Is there any, like, the unit being added? I think what we've talked about is similar size to the other units, but we're not adjusting the other unit square footage at all in this situation, are we? Jillian, maybe you can help with that.
No, there would be no addition to the other units.
Okay. Then my other issue is we're going to add more parking. I haven't seen the draft site plan, but I know that when this application came before us, we expressed a great deal of concern around things like buffering. Just want to ensure that that does not impact the buffering that was planned for in the initial approval, because we felt that that was critical to the success of the project. Jillian, I guess I'm going to go to you for this.
Yeah. The buffering would not be impacted. If you'd like, I have the site plan I can pull up and show you. It's the parking is very similar to what was originally approved.
Okay. And then I guess the other one is just a comment in terms of we're adding more units, but decreasing common amenity space seems a bit paradoxical to me. If we're going to have more people and less space. So I understand the desire to have an additional unit, that's additional revenue, but it's going to impact potentially the quality of life for the people that are there.
I agree with you, Marilyn.
Okay. So Zach, could you comment on how you see this project with regard to the 4 tests for minor variance, please?
Sure, through the chair. In our report, we kind of outlined the density requirements for the site regarding kind of the fact that the building's already under construction. There's really no exterior changes. So we are adding an additional unit, but that unit, the way it was proposed in the zoning bylaw and the way we propose it in any zoning bylaw, has the ability to be varied from in the future. It's not necessarily because a zoning bylaw amendment is approved in council, it doesn't mean that that can't be changed when deemed appropriate. In our opinion, being, like I said, this building's under construction, there's really no exterior changes. Staff are satisfied that it meets the requirements for a minor variance.
Questions or comments from committee? Okay, we'll move to the decision, and it reads as follows: that their minor variance applied for an application A09/25 for the property described as Wellington North Range Southwater, Main Street, Park Lot 9, Registered Plan 61R, 7008. Part 1, Geographic Town of Mount Forest with a civic address of 7, is that 733 or 773? 773, I think. Princess Street to provide the following relief. Number 1, that a total of 33 apartment units be permitted to allow 1 additional apartment, whereas the bylaw permits a maximum of 32 units, with the condition that the applicant shall submit a revised site plan of the property with a revised parking layout to meet the required parking requirements. All those in favor? That's approved. We'll move on to adjourn the Committee of Adjustment meeting. A recommendation that the Committee of Adjustment meeting of May 5th, 2025 be adjourned at 2:21 p.m. Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Hearn. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We're adjourned from the Committee of Adjustment meeting. We'll go back to our regular council meeting with the recommendation that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North resume the May 5th, 2025 regular meeting of council at 2:21 p.m. Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Burke. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. I don't think we have any questions on agenda items.
We do not have anyone registered.
Okay, so we'll move on to adoption of the minutes. We have a recommendation that the minutes of the regular meeting of council held on April 22nd, 2025 be adopted as circulated. Moved by Councillor Hearn, seconded by Councillor Rankin. Questions, comments? I'm just going to add a comment just for fun. We get excellent minutes virtually every time. I can't remember at the time we've had any revisions, so congratulations to staff for doing that.
Well, that's mostly Kathy's doing, so kudos to Kathy.
With that said, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. I don't think we have any business arising, so we'll move on to identification of items requiring separate discussion. And to be pulled out for discussion, I have item 3A, item 4A, item 6A, and item 7A. So dealing with everything else, our recommendation will be that all items listed under items for consideration on the April 22nd, 2025 council agenda, with the exception of those items identified for separate discussion, be approved and the recommendations therein be adopted. Moved by Councillor Hearn, seconded by Councillor Rankin. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we'll move on to 3A, which is the Community Improvement Plan report. We have a recommendation that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive report C and ED 2025-16 on the Arthur Barbershop Community Improvement Plan application, and that Council approve a facade improvement grant in the amount of $888 to Arthur Barbershop for new business signage. We get a mover and a seconder. Councillor McCabe. Councillor Burke, thank you as a seconder. Questions, comments? Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Lennox. With regards to 3A, on page 37, there's a table that lays out the last 13 years of dollar amounts that the township has approved for grants. They total just a little over 504,000, and then the amount advanced is almost 449,000. So I'm just wondering why or what the difference of the 55,584 is.
Brooke, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor Lennox. So council approves the overall amount, but the checks are only provided to the applicants for the work that's completed. So if they don't complete the full scope of work, then they are only reimbursed for that amount. So that's why the discrepancy is there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor McCabe.
So of this 448,569,000, it says there's a total beneficial improvement of almost, 9.4 times this amount, equaling $4,230,263. Like, So am I reading this right? And how is that calculated?
Robin, do you want to handle that one?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So that amount it's correct. So the township has given grants of the amount of 448,000, but the private business owners have put in approximately 4.23 million. So yeah. So you can look at it as a return on investment in a way, right? To private investment. So, which is fantastic for the township. It means that the businesses have pride and are renovating and rejuvenating the town with their own dollars, with just a little bit of township incentive.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you very much, and good investment.
Yep,
Thank you.
fantastic.
Any other questions or comments? I would comment too that since we started this program, we've seen, you mentioned the dollar amount of uptake, Councillor McCabe, but I think we've seen a very visible increase in the quality of signage and the look of our downtown cores in particular during that same period of time. So it's not just township dollars, it's private dollars being spent too.
Yeah.
And our community is benefiting as a whole. Okay, that said, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Brings us to 4A. There's a fairly lengthy recommendation, but this is a big thing, so I think I will read it all. The recommendation is as follows: that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive report TR 2025-003 Phase 2 Financing Strategy Arthur Wastewater Treatment Plant Upgrade, and that Council approve the blended financing approach comprising reserve contributions, developer upfront contributions, and debt financing. And further, that Council directs staff to finalize the developer agreement framework targeting upfront contributions of approximately $2,025,000. And further, the Council authorize staff to proceed with preparations for a debt issuance of at least $4,725,000. And further, the Council directs staff to continue to apply for funding opportunities by upper levels of government that can offset the financial burden related to infrastructure for growth, including housing. And further, the Council directs staff to review the work plan for Phase 2 of the Arthur Wastewater Treatment Plant and prepare to tender the project following the completion of the debt issuance. And further, the Council lifts the suspension of sewage allocation in the Village of Arthur and allocate all uncommitted wastewater reserve capacity in the amount of 396 equivalent residential units and all future uncommitted wastewater reserve capacity to the lands identified in Schedule A of this report, which implements the recommendations of the Township's Growth Management Action Plan dated August 16, 2024, prepared by Watson and Associates Economists Limited. And further, that all sub-allocations within the area identified in Schedule A of this report shall be undertaken in accordance with the Township's sewage allocation policy. And further, that the developers of the applicable lands identified in Schedule A of this report be invited to participate in the financing strategy of future wastewater capacity. Could I get a mover? Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Burke. Discussion. Who wants to dive in first? Councillor Burke?
So thank you for the report. And we all know that Phase 2 of the Arthur Wastewater Treatment Plant is necessary to continue with growth. However, my concerns are that our debt for the municipality would be just about 4.7 million. And we're asking for a 15% target upfront contribution cost from the developers through negotiated agreements. My first question would be, has there been any dialogue or conversation with the developers, and what is the response for the dollars that we're looking for? I also have a concern with it with the verbiage that says targeted. I think that it should be not targeted. I said, I think it should be attained before we move forward. I have a concern with the annual debt. As phase one, we're paying 571,000 annually. Or no, sorry, that's for phase two that we're talking about here. And we still have an annual payment of 565,000 approximately for phase one. So how will this debt repayment impact our future budgets? And how will moving forward with this project, although a very much needed project, by moving forward on our own without support from upper levels of government, how will this impact future grant applications? I'm fine with lifting the suspension of sewage allocation, as we know that we've all received pressures on the development in Arthur and from some of the developers themselves. So lifting the uncommitted capacity units, I'm fine with, but I have grave concerns over how we're going to fund this project.
Councillor McCabe, you want
Are you looking for an answer or?
to? Oh,
Yeah, sorry, I was like, I'm not answering that.
you're not.
I might get a different answer than what Jerry's gonna say.
Yeah. We'll let Jerry take a stab at that then. Sorry.
Thank you.
Through you, Mayor Lennox. Just trying to get a list of all the questions. Where do I have that saved? Okay.
We can knock them off one at a time. I'm sure Councillor Burke will remind us of some if they're overlooked.
Okay. In terms of dialogue, what township staff are looking for from today is authorization to actually create the framework that will guide those conversations. We wanted to be at a position where we know the answers to the type of questions developers would throw at us through working with obviously the different teams within the township and our lawyers on the parameters in which we could operate in terms of those agreements. So we're going to be having those conversations subsequent to the authorization we get from council today. But what staff have done is tailored this to our growth management strategy from last year and identified the lands and developers within that context that we'll be inviting to participate in the financing strategy that we have there. The other question you had on the verbiage that we used for the $2 million target. We had set a target in the sense that it could be higher because we're looking at the costs that we have in front of you are based on our 2024 budget estimates from the engineers, which was at 13.5 million. Since that time till now, since 2023 when the budget was created till now, there have been a lot of cost pressures in the economy. The tariffs is one that we're still trying to get grasp of. We're looking to ask developers to contribute this as a minimum, and then that 15% could arbitrarily grow if the cost for the project itself grows. So that's where that verbiage really means. It doesn't mean that we're looking to start the project before we hit that target. It just means it probably increases. In terms of our debt, our debt is slightly improved. Last year we used to have the existing debt level for the phase one upgrade, and we had one that has been in the books for over 20 years for Mount Forest, which has now come off the books. So that's about half of what we're going to be paying towards this new loan. But in addition to that, our debt obligation for this project is funded through user fees. It's not a property tax dollar funded project. So we're going to be tying this to our rate study that is currently ongoing, which looks at all of the capital related projects that we need for the township for our water and wastewater.
irrespective of our budgets on a year-to-year basis. It gives us a 10-year scope, 10+ year scope on those capital projects, and determines what our rates will look like from there. Over the last 5 years, we've had about a 1.5% increase per year for I think the last 3 years, but over the last 5 years study. So that would probably impact, that's what the study will end up being in terms of recommended increments on a year-to-year basis. But what this also does is sets the basis for our new development charges going forward as well. Because the principle here is that the loan would not be paid by only existing users, it will be paid by future users. So every new development we have out there, the development charges would calculate this cost embedded in it to be able to come up with what the final numbers will be per unit. So that's how it's going to be funded. Our current split is 15% to existing users and 85% to future users. And the other thing about the loan allows us to spread the payments not just to the existing users as well. It gives us along with a 10-year period where as we continue to draw down every year for those 10 years, the user fees we get from users who come into the township and leave the township would pay their fair share in this infrastructure that we're trying to get built. I know there are a few more questions there. Let's see if I have all of them knocked out. In terms of grant applications, some of the grants we've applied for so far are looking to see that our projects are shovel ready. So this gives us even one more step in that process to show that we're really ready to move forward. Our expectation is not to tender this year. We're looking to tender sometime next year, hopefully. That still gives us a runway to apply for the grants that show up between now and that time next year. I know upper levels of governments, as they settle into their new administrations, are going to be putting out grants, opportunities which the township will be taking advantage of. Recently, the township just applied for a grant in collaboration with Mapleton to kind of buffer the numbers and make it into the realms of what we've seen the successful applications look like in other municipalities. So we're going to continue to survey the environment to see what those grants opportunities out there and then apply as needed.
Did you have more, Councillor Burke? Okay. Thank you, Jerry. Councillor McCabe, I'll go to you next.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lennox, I have a four-parter question, Jerry. So I'll start. I really did like the idea of the municipal service corporation, kind of similar to what we had with Wellington North Power. And I know in the past we've applied for phase 2 funding from the province and the federal government. I can't remember off the top of my head how many times, but every time we've been turned down. So I kind of like this approach because it was different approach than what we've done before. And it seems that when it comes to funding, both entities prefer bigger investments. For an example, the city of Ottawa a number of years ago asked for or applied for 26 million and received 29. So that kind of stuff kind of sits with me a bit. So while I'm of course supportive of applying again, what amount are we going to be applying for this time? So that's part one.
Okay. You want to tackle Brooke?
I think Brooke can go.
So there's a few in there. Sorry.
Through you, Mayor Lennox. So thank you for the question. This is the strategy that staff have some control over. So we're bringing this to council for decision. We are still continuing to work with our partners on looking at things, innovative approaches like municipal service corporations, and then of course applying for various grant applications. So we continue to apply for the full amount plus contingencies. So that's our approach, because that's typically what the applications are looking for, with some sort of municipal contribution. So we've been able to identify municipal contributions through past reports, but then this sort of lays out our strategy if we don't get any of that funding. And the challenge is right now we keep applying and waiting for answers, which takes many months. And then when we receive an answer that is unfortunate, we kind of come back to the drawing board. And so in the meantime, development continues, and people are looking for some sort of certainty in terms of the sewage allocation. And so without some decision to proceed, I think on our own, unfortunately, it's very hard for us to answer those questions. So we continue to look for the full amount. We continue to look at other innovative strategies like municipal service corporations, which I believe if appropriate at a later date, we could participate in or evaluate. This is just sort of our next step, our kind of backup plan, if none of those other things come to fruition.
Okay. All righty.
Go ahead, Councilor McCabe.
All right, so thank you for that, Brooke. Yeah, and it is a catch-22. It seems like the province spends money where it's politically to their advantage in ridings that aren't their supporters, and then on the federal flip side of things, they fund projects that are friendly to them and support the party that's in power. So we are doing this. This is, I guess, as you said, a contingency plan to do it all on our own with or without help from the province or feds. Is that right?
Correct.
Through you, Mayor Lennox, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Another one, Councilor
Sure.
McCabe?
Yeah, you don't mind, unless someone else wants to go. Okay. I'm not a fan of being beholders to developers. I know we did it before. But I find it kind of a slippery slope. And so if we're doing this, how can we be sure that developers would even upfront the costs? I'm sure they would jump at it, don't get me wrong. It doesn't really sit that well with me, but I'll wait for a response and then I have another little follow-up to this one.
Okay. You want to tackle Brooke?
I can take the first crack at it and then I'll look
Right.
at Terry, but through you, Mayor Lennox. So the financial sustainability of some of these projects and our ability to take this on, obviously we want to look at partnerships where we can, and being able to partner with a development community where it makes sense within a specified framework with defined criteria is a strategy that other municipalities have used to varying degrees of success.
Yeah.
So I believe, partly our approach to this is a conservative one in terms of making sure we have that base target set, that we know what funding we need to raise, and then the lands that would be involved in those discussions. And that way it kind of defines the parameters for that conversation. Otherwise, it's quite wide open. So our intent, if council approves this today, is we would have the boundaries and we would know the developments that we would be looking at potentially, and we could initiate those conversations and develop that legal framework that hopefully is equitable, fair, and enforceable, and gets us where we need to be. That said, we would bring that back to council for sort of final approval, because obviously the developments would have different phasing and there's lots of different considerations, and I'm sure lots of different interesting things would come up as part of those conversations.
Okay.
So we'd be able to kind of define that, bring that back. But our idea here was not to do something that was like in terms of the target, we wanted it to be reasonable for all parties involved. We wanted to provide some certainty then in terms of the project moving forward, because that's a big part of this. And until we know that we're moving forward with the second phase, we're very concerned about allocating the remaining sewage allocations that we have left, because obviously once they're gone, they're gone. So maybe I'll pass it over to Jerry if he has any additional comments, just in terms of what he's seen in the industry and these types of agreements.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, Jerry.
Through you, Mayor Lennox. Brooke, I think you covered it well. No additional comments.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor McCabe?
So if it's 2 million, that would come off of, so say a developer pays it up front, so that would come off their future development charges, is that right?
Treatment.
Jerry, go ahead.
It is a possibility. Those are some of the things that we're going to be looking at once we define what our framework looks like. It could come out, we could offer DC credits, like you said, back to the developers who are upfronting those costs for us. But once we have that framework fully framed out, we'll be able to determine what the incentives are to each developer. Yeah.
So just before you go on.
Yep.
I just think that's becoming clearer to me that this is a framework, not a final destination. And that I think what we're being asked to do today is to see if we agree generally with the framework, but there's a lot of details and work that has to go in before we're going to be making the decision to move forward.
Yeah, and I just want to find out some of the, I guess, answers to the questions before I agree to any kind of a framework,
Right.
Mayor Lennox. And so the
No, I wasn't trying to short
no.
circuit. I just was thinking this is a great time for us to be getting our concerns out so that staff have a chance to work with that as they're formulating
Yep.
this as we move forward. Let's go ahead.
Yep. So this is the final one from me. So that's good. Thank you, Jerry, and thank you, Brooke, for that answer. I guess my concern is if the province scraps DCs, then the township would have to pay this back ourselves, so to speak. If a developer upfronted 2 million, and then all of a sudden the province comes back and says, "Yeah, we're not doing DCs anymore throughout the whole province," then we're on the hook to pay that 2 million back, and not give them credit back for future development charges. Does that make any sense?
Brooke?
Through you, Mayor Lennox, if that happened, we would have a lot of questions to answer. And I think the legislation would have to be fairly clear in terms of how that would all work, because other municipalities would be impacted by this as well, given that so many are going this route to use upfront developer contributions. So I'm not entirely sure what that would look like, but it would be a challenge for certain. And we'd have to look at other ways of covering that shortfall if that indeed was the case. And there was suddenly no requirement to pay DCs for growth. But that would be a very significant shift in terms of that growth pays for growth kind of philosophy. And I expect there would be a lot of concern about that. But Jerry, go ahead.
I'll just re-echo what Burke had said. It would have to be it will affect a significant amount of municipalities across the province. We have seen examples even within our county where this type of agreements are in place, and it has helped with similar infrastructure growth. And the whole principle of growth pays from growth becomes derailed by a significant impact of that nature. But what we've also done here, the reason why we've not allocated a more higher amount from our reserve or development charges reserve capacity is to give us some buffer in the case of any contingencies that arises, and also for the fact that we also have other capital projects that would come up down the pipeline. So this probably gives us where we can go back to at the worst case scenario. But we don't think that would be the case. So we're hoping it doesn't impact us in that way.
I would comment to Councillor McCabe that if, and we've all heard the rhetoric and the discussion from other levels of government that development charges are the barrier and that they need to be gotten rid of or drastically reduced. If you want to draw development to a halt, go ahead and eliminate them, because that's what's going to happen.
Yep.
Because, let's say we proceed with this program, we're going to be fairly stretched on our debt capabilities. What happens when we need the next piece of infrastructure to be able to accommodate growth? We're not going to be able to finance it. So whether DCs exist or not in the current form, either if our society deems that this cost should be borne more broadly by society, then that money has to come from federal or provincial governments, or both.
Yep.
If that's not the case, then there still needs to be some mechanism for developers to contribute to this, because it's not fair to put all the onus on the existing tax and water and wastewater ratepayers. Because I can see, my immediate reaction was you take away all that revenue, whoa, stop. We're not going anywhere. And that's going to happen in a very broad way, which is actually completely counterproductive for what the whole thing is aimed at doing. So I share your concern with that, and because we don't know what would replace it. But I also have some confidence in that we would need a mechanism to replace it, and I use our experience with Wellington North Power as an example. Wellington North Power doesn't collect development charges. They don't have a set formula for what each development should contribute to the infrastructure, but they have a fairly convoluted process to determine what's necessary for a developer to contribute to make a project go ahead.
Yep.
So that could be where we're headed. I'm total speculation on my part, but the reality is that we would need some sort of mechanism to help fund that infrastructure. To just put it on the existing rate and taxpayers would be completely inappropriate.
Nope. Oh, I totally agree. We have to have some, like you say, mechanism for growth. So just one final comment and that's it. I do really like the idea of keeping the last, or I shouldn't say the last, but the 396 remaining allocations within our boundaries. I think that's great, and we should probably service that before we go outside of them. So I really like that approach as well. So with that, I have no more further questions on this one. Thank
Famous
you.
last words.
Thank you.
Other questions, Councillor Hearn, Councillor Rankin? Councillor Rankin, you go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lennox. I understand the developers are very anxious to get their sewage allocations, and it would be great for the township. However, I'm concerned about the debt as well. I know the first one has been completed, but the second debt that we have is not complete until 2031. And I know it's all been laid out that we can take it from reserves and so forth. But with the economic climate the way it is now, I'm concerned about having to not even deplete, but take from all these different reserves. And you don't know what is going to happen. Are these units going to be sold? Are they going to be filled? And are there going to be taxpayers paying for their sewage monthly? So I would rather see, I think, not lifting the suspension for all of the allocations, but doing it, phasing it in. So it's more, to me, it's more viably economically.
You got a list too? Councillor Hearn?
I think I'm pretty questioned out. There have been a lot
I
of
got a list
questions,
here,
but
so you go ahead.
I don't think I have any questions. I think, given all the questions that we've had so far that I think have been well answered, I think it's proactive, and I like that this option's available. To Councillor McCabe's point about staying within the urban boundary. If we don't provide a framework to do that, we're going to chip away at the exterior with people that will put in a well and septic and keep hitting us that way. Yeah, I'm in favor of kind of a proactive way to look at this.
So I've got a few questions and comments. First one, I think is probably to you, Jerry, and just want to make sure that I understand clearly, like in terms of the reserve funding, we would be taking some from our regular sewage reserve, but a big chunk of that would be coming out of the DC reserve as well, right?
3 million, that's correct. 15% would come out of our regular reserve, which grows from the surplus that we get from our water and sewer allocation rates on a year-to-year basis. The other chunk, about 35%, will come from our development charges reserved for sewer, which will bring the township to about 50%.
Okay. So then with the amount coming out of the regular reserve, that would fund the percentage of this project that is over and above required for growth, like I forget the percentage now, but there's a percentage of the project is allocated to the existing users. Is that?
That's correct. It would fund exactly 15%, which is what's allocated to existing users.
Right. So with that being said, then that debt really should be 100% funded through DCs.
3 million, that's correct as well. Similar concept we have with existing debt. We fund them through the DCs on a year-to-year basis.
So our DCs would have, I mean, we need to update our DCs anyways because we've had a fair bit of inflation since the last time we did it. But it would need to reflect that debt servicing cost going forward as well.
That's correct. Currently, we index our DCs on a yearly basis, but the intention of staff is next year to do a full DC study again, and then continue to index it for inflation afterwards. But it will include this debt servicing as part of the obligations going forward.
Okay. Okay, then my next questions are really more around the allocation side of things. So with the, and I'm not sure who to direct these to, maybe you can start, Brooke. My first one is with regard to infill. So we've been allocating a certain amount of units on an annual basis to infill, which allows, you know, some lots to be more completely utilized and those types of things. And I want to make sure that, you know, over the longer term, we're maintaining the ability to infill over the longer term as well, that we wouldn't be allocating all of these to more greenfield type projects, but also infill.
Through you, Mayor Lennox. Yep, that's the intention with lifting the development freeze and allocating all of those units and future units to the areas identified in the schedule there to really maximize on intensification. Inside of that allocation, sub allocations to developers would still need to follow our sewage allocation policy, which leaves us with a buffer, so we don't give them all out and be left with none, and then still allocates for infill.
Okay, so just if I understand this correctly, then we would say all of these units are dedicated to this boundary, which is set out in the schedule, but we're not specifically allocating them to individual projects at this stage. It would just be project must be within the boundary to qualify and would go through the normal allocation process. Is
that's exactly correct?
So I guess that deals with one of my next questions was what about, you know, we have a 36-month or something like that expiry on them, you know, to try to make sure that these units are being used promptly, to Councillor Rankin's point, which I think is a valid one. We don't want to tie up huge amounts of capital and have it not be used. So if we continue to see that expiry process in place, then that's going to spur developers to get on with it once they're ready to go.
Hopefully that's the intent anyways.
Right. Okay. So, and similar to Councillor McCabe's concerns around inviting developers to contribute to this, I'm assuming that they would, you know, in order to agree to it, they're going to want some preferential treatment in terms of their allocation. And I just have concerns about how that plays out in the pace of growth type of thing. But when I think about it, they're only going to be funding 15% of the project, I would think that amount of leverage, while not completely disappearing, would certainly need to be somewhat constrained. I don't know who to pass that one to. Brooke, do you want to try that?
Sure.
Through your, Mayor Lennox. So finding the balance and of incentive and certainty and fairness, I think, is the goal here. And I would say that we are also mindful that the staging of development is going to happen at different time frames. And so obviously when those developers would be willing to upfront those funds, that would also be different. So this is why we need to kind of maintain some flexibility. We want a consistent agreement, a consistent approach. I think just the certainty that they're potentially eligible for that that allocation, that the rules aren't going to shift, actually does provide some certainty to them, and it might be enough incentive for them to participate. And that's kind of our leverage, is that we have a plan that we're going to use to go forward, and this is how things are going to proceed. Right now, there's a lot of uncertainty out there.
Okay. My next question is with regard to the lands identified in the schedule. I mean, there's a great deal of uncertainty about, you know, the density and so on around in that area. We could potentially, and this is speculation on my part, but we could potentially exceed the capacity of phase 2 from within that envelope. And so then I guess maybe I'm answering my question myself, but if we're going through the normal sewage allocation policy process, we're going to be able to address that through that process. That, Darren? Yeah. Probably wasn't the most clear question, but
Yep, no, I understand the question. So we'll be able to manage growth through the sewage allocation policy and potentially a revamped or revised sewage allocation policy.
okay. All right, and then my other question, this one's probably more for you, Jerry, although there's probably some infrastructure staff that could weigh in on this as well. Sewage treatment capacity is not the only thing we need to support growth in terms of infrastructure. We've had significant discussions about a water supply in Arthur. We've had discussions about expansion of the wastewater treatment in Mount Forest. How are we going to be positioned from a capital ability to raise capital to meet those projects? Do we need to start looking at staging this over a number of years so that we can manage that pace and still do it within our debt capacity? And are we going to sign ourselves up to a revolving process of developer contributions?
Through you, Mayor Lennox. Um, uh, some of the things that staff are working through right now, it's updating our rate study. We're looking at it with a very fine eyes for our 10-year capital, or even beyond that. And we're also working on our technical updates for both water and sewer. We're hoping that once this is done, it kind of aligns our rates to our needs on a go-forward basis. But we're also looking at the possibility, and we've mentioned here, with the hopes that the DCs remain a mechanisms for the municipalities, that we'll do a full background study and a DC update next year. That being said, we over the last few years, we've been able to have a few years where we had growth and surpluses in our water and sewer. So that has given us buffers in which we're able to build up the reserves in those environments, in those two areas. And also we've collected development charges over the years that these projects were assigned to. It just happens that the phase 2 upgrade has come up a lot sooner than it was expected for in the DC study that was completed in 2021, I believe. But since that DC study was completed, we have been collecting development charges in the hopes of this project and similar projects of the likes. So we're only just utilizing the funds now that we collected over the years. So our DC is going to be depleted by quite a bit, about 4.7 million or so, based on the estimates in front of you. But in addition to, but we're in a position where we still have some buffer left that will cater to some of the other projects that are listed on the DC studies, and we've taken that into consideration in setting the targets for the township. In terms of our debt capacity, we have the ability to take more debt based on the province 25% threshold, but we feel that the level at which we're going to be in terms of our debts after this debt issuance in early 2026 is a more fiscal responsible way to stay at as it gets continue to grow that debt level at a much higher pace. So we're looking at all of those metrics and determining which has led to the metrics that we have in front of you. We'll continue to fine tune it as we go. We're also still very positive in the grant applications that we're putting forth. We believe that at some point in time, we'll probably be successful with one, but we'll wait to see what time tells us with regards to that.
Okay. Thanks, Jerry. I guess, we're in a very uncertain economic time right now, and it's unpredictable in terms of whether we will continue to have the pace of growth that we've had in the last number of years. So, I hate to create more work. It may be valuable for us to have 2 or 3 different scenarios of a pace of growth and how that flows out to the infrastructure investment requirements, whether it be a slower pace of growth, a moderate pace of growth, or a faster pace of growth, and how we're able to handle that might be useful to when we start to get to that, looking at the need for that infrastructure investment. It would certainly be helpful to understand. Maybe we have to restrict growth to a more moderate level in order to be able to continue to fund the infrastructure. So I think this, at least from my experience of my time on council, we've come out of a period of very slow, modest growth into a pace of what I call almost breakneck speed. And try to figure out how to balance all that is really tricky. So I'm sure staff are wrestling with that. I guess I'm just laying down the challenge to help council wrestle with that too. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Rankin.
Thank you. I just have one of interest. When a sewage allocation has expired, what happens? Do they go to the bottom of a list, or do they just continue on with the status that they had?
Go ahead, Darren.
Yep, those allocations return to the uncommitted reserves capacity, and those developers then need to reapply, and then they're considered against the other developers that come forward
On the merits of the time of application.
That's right.
I heard you had your hand up, Tammy. Did you have anything to add?
No, I had the same comments that Darren had. He's correct.
Oh, okay, thanks. Okay, and any other questions or comments? So if we approve this, staff are going to continue to work on this to develop this framework more fully and come back to us with a bit more refined project. Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to 5A. This is the fire services wage policy. We have a recommendation that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive report fire 2025-003 fire services wage policy, and the council adopts the wage policy and directs staff to implement it as of May 1st, 2025. Could I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Rankin and Councillor Hearn, thank you. Questions, comments? Councillor McCabe?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Lennox, it's good to have all the firefighters paid the same way and the same amount throughout the throughout our fire services. I was just curious if there's anything else that still isn't common between the team across Wellington North, Minto, and Mapleton. I know they kind of tried to make the trucks all the same so that the equipment's in the same place, whether it's coming from Minto, Mapleton, or Wellington North. So, and then the pay is on equal basis. I was just wondering if there's anything else that's out there that still needs to be kind of brought in as a common feature for all firefighters.
I can maybe answer part of that for you, Councillor McCabe. Sure. I don't have a specific example to give you, but I know that fire services staff are working hard on creating a master's plan for all three municipalities, and the beginnings of that is to be shared with the fire committee later this week. Yep. It's a fairly large project, so it'll take a little time to unfold and have some preliminary discussions, but it will be coming back to us to enhance that. I mean, the most visible example of why we can work together and share is Minto has an aerial truck.
Yep.
We may need an aerial truck, but probably we don't need one in each municipality. So if there's opportunities like that, I'm sure we'll be fine tuning that. I'm waiting to see what the first draft looks like, but I think there will be more to come.
Okay. And
anything further?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I had a chance to talk to one of the provincial instructors that was in Mapleton this past couple of days and on the weekend, and he was really very impressed with the entire fire service and the coordination between councils, but more importantly, I think between all the firefighters as well. He said the past training exercises that he has done, this one has had the most firefighters through it, which is great. Since he's become an instructor. So very well done, Chief Harrow. And I'm sorry I didn't get out there, but like I said, I heard it was very, very well attended by firefighters, like as far away as Toronto.
Did you have anything you
Thank you,
wanted to add?
Councilor McCabe. Yeah, thank you, Councilor McCabe. I appreciate that. I will definitely pass that on to the firefighters. This past Wednesday to Sunday, we had over 100 firefighters of our firefighters through that. So, and some of our firefighters that are full-time elsewhere were able to come and go through it, and they were happy, and it was just fantastic training. And when I went through it on Saturday, I do realize how out of shape I am and how much work I need to do. So it sure showed me that. So it was very humbling to know how out of shape I am. So
Jeez. Thank you. Thank you, Andy, too.
Yeah.
For, Mayor Lennox.
Interesting. I had a member of the public comment to me about the fire wage policy changes, and they were making the argument, well, why does it need to go up this much? And I said, well, don't you think people deserve a change in pay based on some inflationary adjustments? Because it's been a number of years since we've had any adjustments. So that was a new perspective for the person who was requesting. They didn't realize that it had been a number of years since it had been adjusted. So it's absolutely appropriate that we make sure that our volunteers are compensated appropriately. So thanks to staff for coordinating that. And Councilor Rankin.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lennox, I'd just like to add the comment that I attended the training with the training mobile, and I was really impressed to say that they're increasing their wages. Well, when you're actually there and you see the smoke billowing out of that mobile, and you know there's flames in there, and you see the firefighters going up and into it, it gives you a whole different perspective, and you value what they're getting paid.
Yeah, we hope that that's the only time we see them doing that. Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to 6A. And make sure I have all of this one. The recommendation that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive report CAO 2025-007 regarding the township's community signage review, and the council directs staff to develop a comprehensive community flag and signage policy to guide use and practice related to township signage assets. And further, the council receives the draft standard operating procedure related to the half-masting of township flagpoles for information. And further, the council approves the boundaries for the township and BIA-related banner installations in the core areas of Mount Forest and Arthur. And further, the council approves the proposed schedule for banner installation / removal up to a maximum of 4 transitions per core area. And further, that council approves the proposed banner installation plan as proposed by the BIA of Arthur for 2025 and 2026 period. And further, the council approves the proposed banner installation plan as proposed by the BIA of Mount Forest for the 2025 and 2026 period. And further, the council approves the proposed township banner installation plan for 2025 and 2026 in Arthur and Mount Forest as outlined in this report. And further, the council receives the draft standard operating procedure related to community banners for information. And that council directs staff to review other township signage assets and develop further SOPs as appropriate. Could I get a mover? Councilor McCabe, seconded by Councilor Burke. Questions, comments? We'll start over on this side of the room this time. Anybody? Over here? Cherry?
That's Steve.
No, you first. I've
Okay.
talked for quite a bit today.
So I just want to thank staff for the report. I know that a lot of time has gone into generating this policy to provide a consistent structure with the banners, signage, and flags that are predominantly installed for the BIA's downtown core in Mount Forest and Arthur. I trust this mapping that we were handed outlines all of the flagpoles. Like this is because it obviously extends past the BIA corridors. Thank you. So I think it's a really great idea to have some consistency with regards to the installation for particularly the banners for the BIA. They put a lot of work and effort into selecting banners that dress our communities for the seasons and make the downtown course welcoming. I also thought it was a good idea that was the in-kind contribution for the installation of the banners. I think that was really important to address that because I know we all hear, oh, well, the township can take care of it. It's okay. My one question is, other than thanking staff and everyone that's involved in putting up the banners and making sure that flags are in good repair, thank you, so that everything looks good. Before we adopt this, have the BIAs had an opportunity to review this policy that we have here in front of us today?
Through you, Mayor Lennox. So there's several elements to this review that we've undertaken, and the BIAs have both had the opportunity to review, especially the initial draft. So this is the drafts that have come back from those discussions, specifically the mapping, which was a really important undertaking, just so we had a better understanding of all of those assets and sort of what everyone's expectations and hopes were for those. The mapping was an important part. The schedule was also an important part. So the schedule that's before you, those four transitions, that was developed by the two BIAs. We asked them to kind of come to some recommendations to staff so that we could propose that to council. They may not use every transition, but we wanted to provide for that. And then we'll try and work within those bounds in terms of the timing of when the banners go up and down, and because that becomes quite an undertaking and we want to sort of maximize our efforts in that respect. So the mapping and the schedule were important parts of the discussion. And then the proposals were from the BIAs themselves. So if you see those proposals that are outlined in this report, those have come directly from the BIA, and that's what we're recommending we go forward with. And then we still have some work to do on our end in terms of the banners that we want to potentially put up. But we've identified the poles that the township can use for any other township messaging. And then hopefully some banners that we want to work with our strategic planning committee to sort of finalize the design, and we'll come back to council with that, as well as any other matters related to we had a lot of good information come out of as part of this discussion in terms of hardware and locations and costs and even some of the other banners that we might want to put up, like the Canada Day banners. So we're working on all of that in the background, but it's been a helpful discussion from my end just to understand kind of what everyone's roles and responsibilities are.
Anything further, Councilor Burke? Councilor McCabe, did you?
Just a quick one, a quick question. Thank you, Mayor Lennox. Just in Arthur, how will the icon and pride banners be coordinated? Will they be displayed at the same time, left up until Remembrance Day, or?
Through you, Mayor Lennox, I believe the BIA has proposed that those banners go up concurrently at the same time, and they're up for basically from spring until the Remembrance Day banners go up, and then they get replaced.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councilor Rankin?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lennox. I like the idea that the township is going to have banners on either end of the BIA course. It makes it consistent, I think, with somebody driving right through the township to be able to see the consistency from the north to the south of it.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Councilor Hearn?
Yes, I do like the idea of the consistency. I like the idea of having Canada Day flags up in Mount Forest too. And I just wanted to comment, if you need any extras, I know where there are some brand new ones that are rolled up in Arthur. Second question, and I think it's outlined in here, but what if something were to go wrong with the plan? And I don't know what that could be, but yeah.
Through you, Mayor Lennox. So as always, if matters arise, we would bring it to council for decision. This just gives us a starting point and a schedule for, hopefully the BIAs sort of know then that they should be preparing their banner plans. They can come to council, be approved. Obviously, there's going to be times where things change and maybe something needs to be replaced or a discussion needs to be had. And this does not preclude that from happening. It just gives us a starting point and sort of a consistent rhythm that we can work with.
Yeah, I too am supportive of what's proposed here as well, but I think there's also anticipation of some additional activity. And I guess I'd like to put my pitch in for some of the things that I'm thinking about, and that is particularly we have flagpoles with Canadian flags on them as appropriate, but if we're following flag protocol, there should be no other flags flown on those poles as well. And I'd really like to see us try to move in that direction. Now, I realize it's important to fly township flags and that sort of thing, and I know we don't have a big budget line for increasing the number of flag poles and those type of things, but in the shorter term, I'd like to see us maybe add possibly 2 flag poles here at the municipal office where we could fly a township flag, and then also a flag pole that we could fly special event flags on. Like we get requests from community groups and have this be the central location where we display those types of things. And maybe in other locations where we have flags, more than one flag flown on a pole, we might consider an additional flagpole from time to time, but I don't think we need to rush into that. Or maybe we do a flagpole a year or something of that nature to try to get closer to maintaining the Canadian flag as the sole flag on the pole. But certainly I'd like to see us move in that direction, and I think I'd like a little bit more clarity in terms of what we're going to do in terms of special event flags. We get requests recently from the Lions clubs, and it's an honor to fly their flag for the period that they request. But I know that I receive many requests for things like flags, and I don't really encourage it because I don't know where we start and stop. And having some policy around what's appropriate and what our schedule is, I think would be very helpful in terms of making sure we feature those types of organizations that are important, like the volunteer organizations, but making sure that we're not running a flag up the flagpole for every occasion, so to speak. Brooke?
Through you, absolutely. So would be the intent. We're doing that broader signage review and I think, or policy, sorry. And that's the kind of thing we can include in it. And then an accompanying SOP related to that. Similar to the banner SOP that we've drafted in here, there is a request for, say, if someone wanted to display some special banners on the township flagpoles, how we would review that. We could do something very similar for a flag if we had an appropriate flag pole identified for that. And as we look at our facilities, we've started to do more inventories of all the different assets. And so we'll be able to come up with a plan for that if that's the direction council would like to go in.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Move on to 7A. This is the planning report with regard to the residential monitoring. We have a recommendation that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive the County of Wellington Planning Committee report dated April 10th, 2025 regarding 2024 residential monitoring report. Moved by Councillor Hearn, seconded by Councillor Rankin. Questions, comments? Anybody? Councillor Rankin, go ahead.
Good question. Through you, Mayor Lennox. It states that the Wellington County is exceeding the 3-year requirement for housing. I'm just wondering where Wellington North stands. Are they exceeding the 3-year limit as well? Oh, I didn't put my.
Who wants to tackle that one? Brooke?
Through you, Mayor Lennox. So I think this report was a really nice information report that sort of aggregates the data, but I had the same kind of questions as I started reading through it, is where does Wellington North stand in terms of all those that information. So I think staff are doing a little bit more review to see what we can pull out. And then one of the things that we are looking at is doing more of a Wellington North focused development report. So I don't have the answer to your question right now, but I think it's a good one, and we can look at incorporating the answer to that into some future materials that come to council. Darren might actually have the answer to that. He may be, but that's kind of the broader picture. But Darren, do you want to comment?
No, we don't have that data available, but, but like Brooke said, we can incorporate some version of that data into a future report.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I had just one more question. And I guess along with that, when you're doing the incorporations, I was just wondering if there's any idea of how many, we've got all these units, apartments and condos that are being built. Do we have any idea how many of these are built and are still vacant? I was just wondering because of the previous talks we've had about the amount of building and filling in and so forth. How many do we have available already, or do we still need to really push to have more? I was just reading an article, and apparently Toronto has a lot of units that are not being utilized, and is there still a need to really push for what the Premier's expecting?
I can take a crack at that. So we do keep track of building permits issued and occupancy permits issued. And as far as I'm aware, there are no vacant dwelling units sitting vacant. Usually the request for an occupancy permit comes, and they're really anxious to get that, so the owner or the tenant can move in.
When driving around, I see signs on buildings that for lease or for rent. So I'm just sort of wondering how well utilized the buildings are.
Yeah, it's probably, I don't think we have the data to say what that is, but I mean, in a larger facility, there's going to be some, I'm going to use the word churn. That might not be the best word, but turnover, where there's people moving out and moving in. So there's always some turnover. And what beyond that, I don't know. I know that anecdotally, I hear lots of feedback that there just isn't rental accommodation available, and buying is out of a lot of people's reach.
I guess that adds another question then. If we have, because I'm sure there are units still available, but are they at an affordable price? And if people are looking for accommodations and there is accommodation available, is that a statement that we need to have accommodation with a lower price expectancy?
Yeah, I don't know who can answer that. You want to try, Brooke?
Through you, Mayor Lennox, these are all sort of a function of demand, supply, the markets, and the different dynamics that are going on. And I think what you're talking about in Toronto, there was a high level of investor activity in that market and people buying on speculation. And so now the decision of whether or not to rent that unit out and at what cost, I mean, people have to make decisions based on their ability to carry those costs and their financing and all of that. So all that to say, we don't have that level of detail. I mean, we can kind of look at anecdotal information that's coming into us. But I think our market's quite different from what we're seeing in Toronto, and there is still a need for affordable accommodations, whether those be rental or housing units. And we'll do the best we can to sort of drill down into that in the future.
I agree that we can't compare to Toronto, but I'm just thinking with the market, the economic climate the way it is now, and the uncertainty for people's jobs and being able to afford homes, I'm just wondering if there's any possibility of encouraging developers to develop ones that are less expensive in our area.
Through you, Mayor Lennox. So the township is definitely looking to incentivize those more affordable or attainable types of units. And we have programs in place that can relieve development charges and things like that at a certain level, but it's all up to the developer to come back to us with kind of their plan and implement that. And again, they're going to make their decisions based on market conditions and kind of what their financial expectations of return are on those. So we can do our best, we can do our part, but we can't control the market unless we started building housing ourselves. So.
Councillor Burke?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Lennox. So just to highlight one of the comments that Councillor Rankin made, I too drive around and see that there are some, without pinpointing specific developments, that there are vacant units and these are new builds. So my question is it can be completely done and they can have an occupancy permit, but that doesn't mean that the unit is actually occupied. Is that correct?
Yes, Councillor Burke, that can be correct.
I think to some extent that situation has existed and does exist at all times. Any other questions, comments? Just wanted to comment too that it's interesting to compare what happens across the county. For instance, Erin right now is going through an immense growth spurt where they're issuing, I think it's somewhere around 40 residential units a month in permits. And that's not just 1 or 2 months, that's month after month after month. And that's showing up in the numbers. By contrast, you have Guelph Massa, which is really capped out in terms of, almost totally capped out in terms of their urban development because of sewage capacity, with virtually no residential units being added. Center Wellington is taking the brunt of the growth across the county, and we are coming a close, on a proportion perspective, we're a close second. Minto and Mapleton are doing what they can. Mapleton's very constrained by wastewater capacity. So I think I think it was Councillor Rankin's comment. I don't have the numbers to say where we are, but I know that we are on a per capita basis. We're contributing more to the housing in the province of Ontario than many cities are on a per capita basis. We're pulling our weight in terms of getting housing built for our province. And I think we have to keep reminding people of that, because I keep hearing, I'm gonna call it negative comments coming out of Queen's Park with regard to what municipalities are doing, and I don't think that applies in our situation. And I think we have to keep reminding them that, hey, we're pulling our weight. You better get on board and help us pull our weight. So. But to say that I have the exact numbers of where we are, I don't have that. But I know that generally we are more than carrying the expectations on a per capita basis. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? That's carried. So that brings us to any notice of motion this afternoon. All right. Community group meeting program report. Anybody have anything they'd like to report on? Councillor McCabe.
Excuse me, it wasn't really a committee meeting or anything, but went to the Country Pantry Kenilworth event yesterday. Got there at 10 and had to wait probably about 15 minutes to get inside the door. And heard there was a wait until almost 1 o'clock to get inside the door. So I was there for about an hour-ish. Really well attended, and it was good to see the MP and MPP there as well.
Yeah, I don't have that one to report on now.
I think you
Thanks,
do.
Steve.
I think you do.
Any others to? Councillor Hearn, go ahead.
Yeah, so we did have a GRCA strategic planning meeting last week. But I also wanted to express my condolences. We did, Councillor Waterloo Region Councilor Carrie Williams, who's on our board of directors, passed away last week. Chair Challoner is attending her memorial today. Despite her health issues, she attended almost every meeting. She attended the one at the end of March. She didn't attend the last meeting. So my condolences, sorry, go out to Carrie. She was only 40 years old. On brighter notes, while you guys were talking about the volunteer celebration that didn't happen, I was at the tile drainage workshop, and if anyone would like some light reading, I have a lot. And I did request, he did kind of make it exciting. Sid Vanderveen taught the course, and I did ask that maybe a future one come up into Midwestern Ontario versus the 2-hour drive to London. So despite having been on several quarter revisions, I learned an awful lot.
Anybody have anything else? So I had 2 openings yesterday, the one that Councillor McCabe referred to, and also the grand opening of the barbershop on Main Street in Mount Forest, which I wasn't aware if they had a grand opening for the one in Arthur. This is the same owner, runs both now. Both the new one in Arthur, and boy, it's a high energy vibe for a barbershop for me. And it was a unique experience and great to see such enthusiasm. And I think they'll make an exceptional addition to the services in our towns. I know that if my wife's experience is anything like other people's, she has to book her haircuts way far ahead. So a little more help in that area will probably ease the pressure on some of that. So I think that's a much needed service, and I'm glad that Mark and his crew are investing in our community, and good to see them with the facade improvement as well. So, and if you're looking for the one in Mount Forest, it's tucked in behind England's Funeral Home and what used to be a garage where Habitat for Humanity was there, beside Pop's Cannabis and the pet shop. So with that, we'll move on to our cultural moment.
The Wellington North Cultural Roundtable presents A Cultural Moment, History of Newspapers in Arthur. The original area newspaper, known as the Arthur Enterprise, was founded in 1862. It was founded by Mr. Luke, who would sell the paper to Mr. W.F. Johnson, who operated the paper for several years before selling to Dr. DeCourcy. Several owners followed, including E.J. O'Callaghan, Harry E. Dewar, and M.C. O'Donnell. It was O'Donnell that moved the Enterprise to 222 George Street. It operated from that location for the next 100 years. Arthur businessman David Brocklebank established a rival paper, the Wellington News, in 1895. Short on both subscribers and advertising, he sold out to the Enterprise a year or so later. The Enterprise News would see ownership change hands in 1902 when Reverend R. Thrine purchased the paper. 2 years later, H.E. Bywater would purchase the paper. In 1906, S.T. Haggard was listed as publisher, but by 1908 Bywater had returned. In 1908, Rickson Rafter purchased the amalgamated Enterprise News. Rafter possessed a keen interest in deciphering and reporting the news of the times. His visual impairment, he had lost eyesight as a boy, did not interfere with his respected position in the community and his dedication to providing newsworthy stories. He piloted the paper for the next 45 years. In 2020, he was inducted into the Ontario Community Newspapers Association's Hall of Fame. In 1953, Rafter sold the Enterprise News to Clive Williams Sr. Williams had been the superintendent of a daily newspaper in Cornwall, so he brought with him a wealth of experience in the business. Clive's son, Clive B. Williams, became an integral part of the news team over the years, and in 1979, he bought out the business from his father. Clive B. Williams continued to produce a quality weekly newspaper, once recognized as the best small newspaper in Canada. Williams also served many years as a member of Arthur Village Council, as a councillor, deputy reeve, and reeve. Effective June 6, 2000, the Arthur Enterprise News and its sister newspaper, the Hairston Review, were purchased by Metroland Media. In the summer of 2019, Metroland Media sold the Arthur Enterprise News and other local papers to Midwestern Newspapers Corporation. The final issue of the Enterprise News was replaced by the Independent Plus without advance notice in September 2019, ending its 157-year history without any fanfare or celebration. In January 2020, the Wellington Advertiser purchased a 50% stake in Midwestern newspapers and replaced the Independent Plus with the North Wellington Community News. Despite its long history of local journalism, Arthur no longer has a weekly newspaper to call its own. Today, residents rely on regional publications and digital media for their weekly news, marking the end of an era for Arthur's once thriving newspaper scene.
Interesting stuff. Okay, we'll move on to our confirming bylaw. We have a recommendation that bylaw number 29-2025 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North at its regular meeting held on May 5th, 2025 be read and passed. Moved by Councillor Rankin, seconded by Councillor Hearn. All those in favor? That's carried. And on to adjournment. Well, I guess before adjournment, we'll just draw your attention to the meetings notices. Mount Forest Community Center Open House is Wednesday from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. It's the second installment of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mount Forest BIA's meetings Tuesday the 13th at 8 a.m. The Arthur Chamber of Commerce the 14th at 5:30 p.m. The next cultural roundtable is the 15th at noon. Mount Forest Chamber of Commerce meets the 20th at 5 p.m. and our next regular council meeting is May 20th at 7 p.m. With that, we'll move to adjournment. My recommendation that the regular council meeting of May 5th, 2025 be adjourned at 3:40 p.m. Moved by Councillor Burke, seconded by Councillor McCabe. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We're adjourned.